Yes, I did get the graveyard, didn't I? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Right, if anybody falls asleep, I'll excuse you, okay? Okay, I'll try to keep it interesting so you stay awake. So today we're going to talk about making your business a hard target for cybercriminals. The brutal reality is that you're competing not to be chosen. That's what you're competing against, okay? Cybercrime, it's industrialized. Hackers don't hack, they just select. And they select easy targets. That's what they do. Okay. Just to give you an example of how ThreatLocker can help. We had a hospital based in the US that had previously been victim to a cybercrime attack. In their previous attack, the hospital had to shut down for 2 weeks. 6,000 devices taken offline could not be used. We implemented ThreatLocker and the same hospital got attacked again. This time they had domain admin credentials. So pretty much we're God on the network. The difference was they were able to affect 200 devices out of 6,000. Hospital stayed open, nothing really was affected, nothing major. And that is the difference of implementing zero trust. It's not the if we get breached, it's when we get breached and how we select our security solutions to help in that breach, contain the breach. So when we're talking about cybercriminal business model, it's about scale now, it's not really about skill. So when I started off my career 20 odd years ago, there was probably about 200,000 developers in the world that could actually write a proper ransomware or malware. Today, thanks to ChatGPT, that's 6 billion people. I can just ask it for malware. We have ransomware as a service as well, which is also makes it easier for attackers. So for an attacker, it's all about speed over sophistication. It's about return on investment. That's what it's all about. If you look at the estimated annual cost of cybercrime in the US from 2017 to 2028, this is in billions now. They reckon in 2028, $1,816 billion is what it's going to be worth. The core question is, why would an attacker choose you? That is the question. Over any other company. So, how are targets selected? As a cyber criminal, how would I select my target? It's internet exposure, having access to them. It's credential availability, all of those successful phishing campaigns that have stored off credentials somewhere. And it's about default configurations. And what I mean by default configurations is even take a multifunction printer. It connects to your network. It has a default username and a default password. Does anybody ever change it? Probably not. An attacker will know this and they'll get onto that printer more so than anything else to get into your network. Default configurations. And weak endpoint controls, or no endpoint controls in most cases. No controls whatsoever. What easy looks like for an attacker is that software can run freely in the environment. There's local admins all over the place. There's no visibility into the true behavior of what people do or don't do. And reactive security tools only. I say reactive because nearly every organization in this room will have some security solution that ends with DR. EDR, XDR, MDR. Detection, response, reactive tools. Okay, that's not a control, that's a reaction. So there's always a myth of, well, we're too small. We're never going to be attacked. But in fact, it's always smaller companies that get hit. If you look at the news and see, M&S is in the news because of a cybercrime attack, well, that's great. That's one company in the news. For every one that makes it into the news, there's 10,000 other companies that have also been victim of a cybercrime that don't make it into the news. And that's the difference. All of those small companies never make it into the news. Smaller companies have less mature controls because they don't invest in security or controls. They've got the same data, they've just got weaker defenses. And that's the difference. So, in terms of how attacks happen, we've got the initial access, it's all the usual. It's the phishing, It's stolen credentials, remote access tools, sitting idle on people's machines. I do this all the time. Every couple of weeks, I like to interest myself by going on to Showdown. It's a search engine. You can search for pretty much anything on it. So I put in Windows Server, search. Okay, you've got 5.4 million Windows servers connected to the internet locally. Okay, search port 3389. 1.2 million of those connected to the internet have RDP directly open to the internet. Very simple from an attacker's point of view. I would just have my egg there and I'd just keep working away at it. Living off the land binaries, I'll get into this later on, but if you're not sure what living off the land binaries are, it's basically utilizing genuine pieces of software in nefarious ways, the way they weren't designed to be used. So initial access, key insights. Most attacks succeed after initial access, not during it. After initial access. I wouldn't be right to point out that my name is Irish. I am Irish, as you can tell. We had the biggest ransomware attack in the history of our state in 2021, which was the HSE, the equivalent of your NHS. When they looked at it afterwards and analysed, the Conti group were actually in their environment for 8 weeks, unnoticed, before they carried out that attack. 8 weeks unnoticed. Stop and post access activity is where what we believe in is allow list and shines. So the concept of allow listing is quite simple. It's only allow what you need to run, and block and deny everything else. EDRs, XDRs, MDRs is supposed to be for prevention. Supposed to be. An EDR and an AV is responsive. It's not a preventative tool. It's responsive. Detection always assumes that there's a compromise, which is already too late. And alerts don't equal protection. Having your SOC team flooded with alerts is not protection. It's very hard to see the woods through the trees when there's just so many alerts coming in. So I mentioned about living off the land. So in any organization where you've implemented an application allow listing solution, which means you only run the applications you need to run and block and deny everything else, there are certain applications you cannot block in your environment. On a Windows device, the top one there is PowerShell. I'd love to be able to stand here and say, yes, we can block PowerShell from running on your device, and we can do that. But your device is going to be unusable because Windows needs PowerShell to run. Every attacker in the world knows this. So when they get into an environment to have an application allow list and solution in place, that's fine. I'll just open up PowerShell. I can do data exfiltration, data encryption, remotely execute code, all through PowerShell. Don't need to do anything else because it's allowed to run in the environment. As well as all the other Windows tools that you just cannot block. As I mentioned about alert fatigue, SOCs just drown in noise and real attacks just blend in. Okay. Funny when I talk about the HSE back then in 2021 when it got hit, they didn't have a security team. They didn't have a SOC. They relied solely on EDR, is what they relied on. Since then, they've 100 staff in their security operations center, and the fallout from it is into 400 million euro to fix and clean up what actually happened in the attack. The hard truth is, if it can run, it can be abused. And that's what living off the land is all about. If it can run, it will be abused. However, default deny flips this model. So to define a hard target is a business where actions are explicitly allowed. In other words, application allow list. Only allow what needs to run and block and deny everything else. Why do I keep saying that? Because every malware, that when you think about it, is just a piece of software. That's all it is. If somebody gets access to your environment, the first thing they're going to run is an IP scan tool to see what everything runs in the environment. Block that, you've already just stopped the attack there and then. They can't move anywhere else. Privilege is always a temporary means when it comes to ThreatLocker. We can allow things to run with privilege access, like local admins, just allow the software itself, but not the actual user. Lateral movement is completely blocked. And when you think about it, the blast radius is then tiny. If they do get onto a device, They can't run any of their tools. They can't run their malware. They can't run their payloads. They can't run any scanning software. They're pretty much on a dead donkey sitting there doing nothing. What are they going to do? Move on. Simple as that. So we believe in control over detection. We're all about controls. Control basically stops bad things before they actually happen. Detection sees bad things after they've happened, when it's too late. Most solutions that detect something has gone wrong, it's too late. Data has already started leaving your environment. Just 1 megabyte of information from your environment could be enough to hold you to ransom. Depends on what information it is. There is a simple zero trust principle. It's trust nothing by default, verify explicitly, and assume a breach. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when it happens, and how you're prepared for it when it does happen, and what controls you have in place to mitigate that attack there and then. So just to define how default denial is explained, nothing runs unless it's allowed. Unknown equals not allowed. Trusted paths are still controlled. So the attack surface reduction is complete because there's fewer executables, there's fewer scripts, and there's fewer admin actions in your environment. This is by putting in these controls. So the outcome is quite simple. As I said, if I'm on a device that I can do nothing on it, I'm not going to hang around. I'm just going to move on. It's too noisy, too slow, too expensive. Attacks are now a return on investment, just like any other position. They're not going to wait around if they can't move anywhere. They'll just move on. So just to explain a bit about what we do, application control, very simple. It's explicit allow listen. Only allows what you need to run, blocks and denies everything else. Which for a lot of people says, okay, we've tried this, we've looked at this, or we've heard that this is too noisy, too hard to manage, too hard to maintain. Which used to be true for application allow listen. 13 years ago, I tried to implement an application allow listen solution in a company I worked for. After 18 months and over €100,000 invested in it, we gave up. It just wasn't possible at the time. ThreatLocker, however, does it nice and easy. It deploys out an agent, learns what it needs to run in the environment, creates policies automatically, and one of the biggest things we do is we have what we call built-in application definitions. What a built-in definition basically means is if this piece of software is on the built-in list, every time that vendor pushes out an update, we catalog that for you, allow the update to run in your environment. That was one of the biggest issues with application allow list, was keeping our software up to date. And it allows us to do it. What you're seeing on the screen here is very simple. If I, as a user, try to run a piece of software that we don't have a policy for, I get this pop-up where I can request access. That can be sent off to your team. You can analyze it and say, sorry, you're not allowed to install roadblocks on a work device. You're simply blocking it and denying it. Okay? In fact, if somebody is trying to do that at home and they see this pop-up, they go, oh shit, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to request that, and they just move on. So ring fencing is unique to what we do. So I mentioned earlier about living off the land binaries. Ring fencing is the ability to further restrict and control what applications can and cannot do in your environment. For example, every single application you run on a Windows device has access to all your other applications, has access to all your data, has access to all your network connections, all your internet connections, because it runs under your profile, it has your permissions. Ring fencing, however, says, okay, PowerShell you can now run, but you cannot access any of my data. You cannot access the internet. You cannot access anything else in the environment. Now, if an attacker gets onto my device and tries to use PowerShell, living off the land, what are they going to do? Absolutely nothing. Have we allowed Windows to still work with PowerShell? Yes, we have. Windows is happy, everybody's happy, except for the attacker. They just cannot use that. And that's the true value of combining these together. I mentioned about privileged access management. We are also can elevate individual applications without actually elevating the user themselves. If you have any legacy software that requires local admins to run, we can control that as well. I come from a managed service provider background. When I think about it now, it's hilarious. We had a piece of software that was installed in 96% of our clients' environments. That piece of software required two things. It required the user to be a full local admin, and it also required macros to be enabled by default. Untrusted. Fantastic. So, come along, ThreatLocker, we were able to sort that issue out. We also do data access and data control as well. So not just blocking USB devices, but locking down access to data in the environment. Okay, stopping the insider threat as well with that data and data being stolen from inside. We're a host-based firewall solution. This has taken a long time. You know, when I started ThreatLocker, there was only 3 modules. I could do this in about 5 minutes. I could be here all day clicking, going through the other features that we do. We're all about controls. If you notice, everything we do is control-based. Control what happens on the devices, even from down to web content control. Stopping access to malicious sites, dating sites, gambling sites, or whatever it may be. But you're basically stopping the malware delivery method. Those phishing sites that somebody gets sent off to, if it's on a malicious site, they can't just access it. They never get to it. We also include patch management to keep everything up to date. Basically, it keeps us in line with all of our frameworks, and we're perfectly fine. So as I said, very simple. We deploy it, we learn it, we review it, we secure it. From day one, it is simply secured. You're streamlining your stack into one single integrated platform, centralized visibility, and we've got a single unified policy engine for locking down our environment. So this cuts out alerts to your SOC team. Remember, if you allow users to do whatever they want on devices, your SOC team has to analyze every single thing they do. If you stop that from day one and only allow them run the applications that they need to run, your SOC team is very happy. They're not getting endless amounts of alerts for different software. So the real world impact of implementing a solution or a zero trust solution is ransomware just fails. Phishing payloads die off, insider threats are completely reduced, and they just move on. If you look at the actual ransomware kill chain, as it's called, it goes through the different phases. Initial access, recon, lateral movement, exfiltration, payload execution, and encryption. Usually the last part, encryption. Where most tools fail is, it only sees it after the encryption starts. That's where they fail. It's during the data exfiltration, when all the data is already leaving, when it's too late. If you're implementing a hard zero trust methodology, the very initial access, the recon is blocked. They can't run their tools. Scripts can't execute and we're stopping that ransomware attack. If there's no payload, there's no ransom. It's quite simple. So an attacker's philosophy is very simple. They want speed, they want certainty, and a hard target just isn't worth it. They'll just move on. There's no point in hanging around. Security is a business decision these days, no longer a IT team's decision. Okay, it's great because when I'm talking to financial institutions, they introduced DORA in Europe, which basically says it's the responsibility of the CEO to implement security. It's his responsibility now, nobody else's, which means that responsibility goes up, which means they start taking security serious. When it comes to a business, downtime costs money, reputation costs even more, and prevention is always better than recovery. When it comes to the hard targets, checklist, default deny, least privilege, application control, and behavior restriction. So on day one, fewer incidents, fewer alerts, more control. We had a conversation earlier, and he asked me about my session, and I said, there's one more that I'll say more than anything else, control. It's what we lack, most organizations lack, is control. If there's anything to take away from this, I'd like you to take away this. You don't need to be unhackable, just harder than the next company. Simple as that. You know that old saying, there was 2 people getting chased by a bear? One stops to put his trainers on. The guy says, what are you putting your trainers on? He's going to catch us and eat us. Well, he said, as long as I can run faster than you, he's not going to catch me. Simple as that. Just make them choose someone else. Now, as I said, when I started ThreatLocker, we had 3 solutions. We move on. We expand every single year. We work with a lot of companies, big, small, indifferent, throughout Europe, throughout the globe. This year we released our ZTNA and ZTCA solutions. So just to explain what ZTNA is, this will give you access to ports and services on a device, whether you're on that network or not on that network, as long as you're connected to the internet. Does not require a VPN. You do not have to open up any firewall rules in your environment for this connection to work. So if I need SMB share access to any of my file shares, it goes through a broker and allows me that access over port 443 outbound. ZTCA then controls access to our cloud solutions, our SaaS solutions. Everything goes through our broker, so that if I need to access Microsoft 365, if I'm not on a ThreatLocker protected device, I cannot access Microsoft 365. If I'm stupid enough to go off to a phishing site, put in my username, my password, even give them my MFA token, they cannot log into Microsoft 365. I was at an event last week and I spoke to one of our clients and I was asking him how things are going. He's like, oh, it's really good. We've put it in now, everything's great. He says, but I had a thing with the CEO. I said, what do you mean you had a thing with the CEO? He said, the CEO rang me up and he says, yeah, I think I might have been a victim of a phishing attack. He was like, what do you mean you think you were a victim? He said, well, you rang me up 10 minutes ago and asked me for my password and my MFA token. He was like, okay, and how are you sure that it wasn't me? He was like, it was only afterwards when I thought about it. You have a very thick Northern Ireland accent. This guy sounded American. It's like, he said, turn off your laptop. That's it. So when I was explaining to him about this, he was like, I definitely need this. I'm implementing it this week. This would have just stopped it. If you haven't come across ThreatLocker before, please check out all of our socials. If you'd like to speak to myself or any of the other team, we're downstairs, we're down the hallway, if you have any questions at all. And just before I finish, thanks for staying awake.